My name's Cam Walker. I work with Friends of the Earth and I'm based in Victoria. Today I'll be sketching out the development of the anti-coal and gas movement in Victoria. We're in a lucky situation down there. We're actually ahead of where New South Wales and Queensland are, in that we don't actually have any commercial gas production at present. We can learn from what's happening in New South Wales and Queensland. I'll also be drawing some observations and asking some questions about how this emerging national movement against new coal and gas could become a more overtly focused environmental justice movement. I'll do two things. I wanted to walk you through what we're doing in Victoria, because the situation is very different to what's going on up north, and in many ways shares a lot in common with the way the campaign and the movement is unfolding in the west and in the north, where the industry isn't as advanced. And we've learnt a lot from Queensland and New South Wales, and I expect that already I'm finding people in the Northern Territory talking to us. They're confronting shale gas as an option, and they're interested in the organising models that we've been using. And then I just want to finish briefly by applying an environmental justice lens to some of the movement that's happening in Victoria, and make a few observations and probably ask myself a few questions. It's very clear that if we're thinking about environmental justice, the way the movement, that is the movement against new fossil fuel projects, tight gas, shale gas, coal seam gas, new coal, it's not framed in the public realm as being an environmental justice movement. And it's kind of interesting that that isn't the case. And I think today is playing a really valuable role for getting us to think about how this issue could be considered one, because obviously it is at its heart, because it's about the questions of who gains from this industry and who doesn't, and how the costs and the benefits are shared around. But to give you the nuts and bolts of what we're doing, we have a resource that isn't as good as it is up north. So we primarily have brown coal, so we're never going to have an industry on the scale of a vision like 30,000 drill rigs, as was just explained for Queensland. This is also a precautionary campaign. Our assessment is, of course, the best time to stop an industry is before it gets established. The minute you've got open cuts and drill rigs and infrastructure, people are going to fight tooth and nail to maximise their profit from that infrastructure. So this was a campaign that was very much criticised at the start for being preemptive, for complaining about a risk that possibly wouldn't happen. This was about 3 years ago. People said, you're getting upset about nothing, there won't be an industry, relax. But what was very apparent was there had been close to 3 decades of people in Victoria looking for unconventional gas. And of course, everyone has seen Gaslands, the video. Everyone is familiar with the campaign against coal seam gas, and that's what's really exercised people in Victoria. But the real risk in the short term is likely to actually come from tight gas. And with that comes a whole series of similar issues around chemical use, the use of hydraulic fracturing, and the potential for groundwater contamination. So a couple of years ago, it became apparent Queensland was going off in terms of the industry getting established. We just looked at the maps and we were terrified to find that basically a third of our state was under exploration licence permit for coal seam gas and or coal. And we also have a secondary set of legislation under the Petroleum Act, which looks at tight gas and other gases. And as was mentioned earlier before, I think it was Jess who said New South Wales is more than 100% under exploration. It's not quite that bad in Victoria, but in many places we have a permit for, say, coal seam gas or coal bed methane, and also tight gas. So there are real areas where they're really actively seeking to establish a commercial industry. We have had test fracking for tight gas and coal seam gas. There's been no commercial production, and we've also had a coal industry which we rely on just for domestic use, not for export, as is the case up north, but which is imminently going to be expanded. And we're expecting an announcement in Victoria fairly soon about a tender process to open up vast new areas of brown coal in our state, and that the notion of an export industry is also being promoted by the state government. So we thought we need to get in there, we need to knock this off, and looking at a third of the state being under exploration licence, we looked for the places where we thought we could win with some brief skirmishes. So in 2010, we focused on the west of the state, and we brought Drew Hutton from Lock the Gate down and drove him around for a week, and we partnered with the EDO who presented the legal side of things, and basically we helped to mobilise people sufficiently that the community forced companies to relinquish 6 exploration licences and 1 coal mine proposal. So in the space of about 8 months, we basically won in Western Victoria. In 2011, we refocused east because that's where the battle will be. The coal resource is better, there's a bit of black coal, and it would appear that the coal seams we do have, the brown coal seams, are much more likely to contain commercially viable CSG gases. So this will be where we're going to be fighting for the next couple of years. We did all the usual stuff. We built the issue in the media. We sought out allies, traditional allies first and foremost, the local sustainability groups, the climate groups, etc. But the non-conventional allies, the Rotary clubs, the CWAs, the fire brigades. We've had incredible luck by going to rural suppliers, the people that provide, fencing wire and watering pipe work and things like that, and going and explaining to them the potential risks of CSG contamination on communities, and they have then become, if you like, viral pathways to put information back out into the farming community in a way that we just couldn't do, being essentially urban greenies. We're building profile, we're going out and speaking at events, and often that's a combination of the Environment Defenders Office, groups like Friends of the Earth, EDO doing law, Friends of the Earth doing environmental impacts, Doctors for the Environment talking about public health impacts. So we're seeking to take it very broadly, and we're using a frame, and this gets back to what I want to finish on, around food security, around water, around community, and around the right to determine the types of futures that people want. Now, previously, work that we'd done in Victoria around the north-south pipeline, which was to stop a pipeline being built to pump water from inland for the benefit of Melbourne, we found common cause with communities north of Melbourne, but it was around water only. This is profoundly different because it's about everything. It's about food, it's about local economy. Gippsland produces more than $1.3 billion worth of food every year. It's around the right to development. It's about how corporations can come into communities and what power they can exercise. So it's actually a campaign that is predicated on building multiple levels of connection, and that is actually why it's so strong, and it's also why it's so exciting. It's not around a short-term, tactical alliance over something, as it was for us with the north-south pipeline that we fought. This is actually about finding common cause and then going from there. And it's in all my years of activism, I've never seen anything like it. Very early on, we decided we wouldn't talk about renewables. We have a pro-renewables campaign called Yes to Renewables, which advocates very strongly for wind energy. And we decided we wouldn't talk about that because we were very aware of, some of the conflicts going on in regional Victoria. And many of the first conversations started with, I don't like wind farms, but I don't like CSG. 6-8 months down the track, we're having people that physically opposed, say, wind farms in South Gippsland entirely coming around, having done research that we've given them leads on, becoming strong advocates for wind energy. So that's been the secondary advantage that I've seen. The first one was strong long-term relationships over multiple issues, areas of concern. The second was actually by engaging with people, you get beyond the stereotypes and you can actually start to drill into preconceived beliefs, I think, and actually build alliances that turn into relationships. And I think that the outcome of this, win, lose or draw, in terms of fighting new fossil fuels, the community development and the politicisation that I've witnessed in hundreds of people is incredibly exciting and incredibly powerful in its own right. So that's another thing, I think, just to kind of park and think through. We've supported the development of local groups. There's now about 11 groups around Victoria, all locally run, all independent, working against new coal or coal seam gas. Coal seam gas exercises people's fears around groundwater contamination. But it's also a pathway that allows us to talk about coal. Coal in Victoria is much harder to mobilise people on in regional Victoria because there's a sense that will just happen in the Latrobe Valley. So if you're in South Gippsland or East Gippsland or Western Vic, it won't impact on you. So that's the third thing, is CSG as an issue, even though tight gas will actually be the thing we're going to be fighting in the next couple of months in Victoria, CSG gives you the pathway to allow you to talk about other fossil fuel developments, which in turn leads you to a conversation around energy futures. And in that context, wind energy and renewables look profoundly different to a farmer than they do if they're just saying, I don't like the look of turbines on those hills. So again, it's around developing transformative relationships and perspectives on things. Out of supporting the local groups, we now coordinate them. So we have a monthly, what's called the Gippsland Alliance meeting, where we share strategy. Out of that has come training. So we've brought Annie Keir and Aidan Ricketts down from New South Wales to share their experience around community, CSG and coal-free community building. We've had our first township declare itself coal and CSG free, a little hamlet of 400 people called Poowong. That was done in February this year. They door-knocked their entire postcode and they got more than 95% support for the proposal. That then has gone like wildfire. There's about another 7 or 8 communities currently doing their surveying and their door-knocking, so there will be further proclamations in coming months. Of course, we have something for the government to do. Oh, that went incredibly quickly. Which is around a moratorium. Now, a moratorium is not really where we want to get to. We want the creation of no-go zones, but a moratorium in the early days was a reasonable ask. We started with that. Now that communities are declaring themselves CSG free, the next stage is to ask the minister to use their powers under what's called the MRSD Act, which gives the right for the minister to say, I'll declare this area a no-go zone for mining for whatever reason. It's very open, and so it's a pathway of educating, mobilising, training, and then having a really strategic and focused approach to applies pressure. The other thing, of course, is 2010 we got a coalition government come into power. The Nationals control Gippsland, which gives incredible power to the Gippsland community, and that was essentially having a campaign that focused on local governments and applying pressure to the local national MPs got us the moratorium and also a ban on the use of BTEX chemicals. I'll quickly finish there. So that's where we're at. The fact is we're winning so far. We haven't lost any. We've knocked off 6 exploration licences and 1 coal mine thus far, and that's on a couple of years of campaigning. So we are actually having a really good run. To finish, environmental justice is a core principle of how Friends of the Earth operates its campaigns, and it's interesting that it's not a strong narrative in this campaign, certainly in Victoria. If we leave aside traditional owner groups and how they're dealt with in this movement and perhaps not dealt with, which is quite problematic, I'll park that one because I don't have time. It's become apparent in Victoria we're going to have a sacrifice zone. There's going to be an area south of the town of Sale, in the area of Locksport up to Seaspray, which is poorer farming country. It's not as rich as the irrigation country to the north or the green country to the west. It's already got gas infrastructure. It's not so good farming country, and there's a lot of low-income people there. And that will be the place where in the next few months you'll probably be hearing about blockading against tight gas operations. So that in itself is an environmental justice issue. Why is this community, just because it's had to live with gas plants in the past, now going to be the sacrifice zone? So there's a whole range of questions there. Sorry, I'll just think about a few quick notes as I wind up. The tension that exists between urban and rural environmentalists has been reduced through this multiple pattern of concern: water, food bowl, export, all that type of thing. But it's not entirely been resolved. The fact that we're facing greenfield developments means that it's not about closing down power stations, it's around protecting farmland, which actually opens the door to some really interesting conversations with unions. And interestingly, the CFMEU mining division is really engaged in this, and some of the regional trades and labour councils are as well. I'll just finish. There's so many other things I wanted to say, but I'll just finish with a little kind of observation, I guess. And that is, to my mind, and being in Victoria and not working up north, what I see with the Lock the Gate movement is it's filling the political space that 15 years ago was taken up by One Nation and by Pauline Hanson, and that type of very right-wing populism. Now, we know Alan Jones is there, we know Bob Katter's party is racing around, we know the DLP is active in this, but if you look at the makeup of the Lock the Gate movement, it's profoundly different to what was going on 15 years ago. At that point, urban progressive people didn't know how to engage with that movement. There were legitimate discontent. There was concern, there was critique of the role of the banks and the corporates and, the supermarkets, but we couldn't engage with it because of the right-wing politics that was sitting over the top of that. This is a profoundly different time. This is so inspiring and it gives me so much hope. And I'll finish with one anecdote that to me kind of epitomises what's going on in Victoria. At the end of our roadshow in Western Victoria, we found ourselves having a forum in the RSL in Colac. Colac was the last town I got a bad thrashing in off a logger during a forest blockade several years ago. It's a really hardcore, very conservative logging town that faces north into dairy country. The mayor is an ex-logger. Two of the councillors are ex-loggers. And it doesn't vote Green is the kindest way to do it. And to sit there that night and hear, the son of a logger and a dairy farmer that had lived in the area his entire life, sitting there under the portrait of the Queen and the artefacts from World War I battlefields in Western Europe, and hearing the common cause that was being woven between the sustainability advocates, the tree changers that had moved to that community, the small-scale organic farmers that were trying to make a commercial go of, goats or trees or, whatever it was they were doing, and the broadacre farmers and the working class people that worked in the sawmill in Colac coming together and actually finding common cause and getting on like the proverbial house on fire gave me a sense of, if we do it right, that's where this movement is going. It will create a new political force that will actually fill a progressive space that talks about justice, that talks about the right of communities to self-determination, that talks about sustainability and talks about caring for country, and that will be miles ahead of where we were 15 years ago. So I'll finish there. Thank you.